Hello, everybody. My name is Brianna Beretta, and we are back for another week of Flyers Talk. I'm here with the Flyers insider, Kevin Durso, and we are going to be recapping the past week for the Philadelphia Flyers. So we can start off talking about the fact that they are on a 9-game point streak right now. And I think we should also talk about the fact that they seem to love overtime, it feels like. If, they had a game against the Capitals that went into a shootout, and then they just won a game Tuesday night against the Devils that was kind of a replay of their first meeting with the Devils. They took the game into overtime, except they won this time. What do you think is making the team successful in these overtime excursions?
There's not really any rhyme or reason to it because overtime's so unpredictable. I mean, in particular with the game that they won against the Devils on Tuesday, that was just kind of surviving the Devils' chances and getting the goaltending, and then creating an opportunity that Owen Tippett gets with the steal and then the score. So it kind of doesn't have a rhyme or reason to it. I think the skill that they have right now is getting the games there because that keeps the points coming in, that keeps the point streak going. They've definitely played well enough throughout these games to get to that point. But then once you get to overtime, anything can really happen. We've seen so far over the course of this point streak, they've lost 2 games in overtime, and both of those games lasted less than 30 seconds into the overtime. So it can happen that quickly that something goes wrong and leads to an overtime loss. They've kind of, in the ones that they've ended up winning, whether it's getting it to a shootout or winning in overtime like they did on Tuesday, it's kind of a feeling out process. They wait it out a little bit. They kind of get it to a point where things maybe slow down for a little bit, and then they can take advantage of an opportunity. So that's kind of a unique thing for them. They don't kind of come out of the gate really quick, but they do find a way to win these games. And maybe that's the biggest kind of lesson of all, is they're finding a way in these games more than anything. It's not necessarily, especially once you get to overtime, because it's so unpredictable, because it's such a skill thing, and they're not the most skilled team. And I think they know that. So because of that, it's really unpredictable for them, but they're finding a way. And I think that that's something that happens because of the way your bench is, or because of the way that your locker room is, that there's just a confidence about finding a way more than anything. So those are the qualities I think that help. It's not necessarily something that translates over to the way you play on the ice, but I think your mindset can influence how things happen out there.
So with Carter Hart being out sick, how do you think the goaltending has stepped up having their starting goalie out of their lineup?
It's been tremendous, and I think you owe everything that you've seen in the last couple of games, in particular, to Sam Ersson. The win against Washington in a shootout, the overtime win against New Jersey, the shutout win that he had against Detroit, all of those games really fall back on him, his performance. It's more than just him. They've played well as a team in all 3 of those games, and that's how they've won them. But I think we can look back on those 3 games in particular and say Sam Ersson was one of the key difference makers in it. And having 2 goalies that are capable of starting is so critical to the game today that, you're seeing Ersson be one of those guys. And there's a lot of teams out there that wish they had even one capable starter. I think right now there's teams that are struggling to be at their full potential because they don't have the goaltending help. We've seen teams carry 3 goaltenders throughout the year. We've seen teams that have watched in recent weeks goalies go down, and now they're scrambling to figure out what the next step is. Maybe they don't have the cap space to keep 3 goalies, so they've tried to put a goalie through waivers and then ultimately needed that goalie later anyway. I'm thinking of teams like Carolina and Detroit that have kind of had to pivot back and go back to the fact that they had a 3rd goalie in the system, but they need to kind of keep moving with the cap. The Flyers are in a really good situation because, first of all, Ersson's on a really friendly contract too. So Ersson's able to be part of the picture, not just this year, but probably long-term future. And I think they see him that way. And then it brings into, when you think about how Carter Hart's played throughout the year, how consistent he's been, you factor in that Ersson's becoming that consistent too. And they're ranking right near the top of the league in a lot of key categories. The only category I think that Ersson's not super high in is save percentage, and that has a lot to do with the start of his season. Recently, he's been one of the best goalies in save percentage as well. So everything equates to that position. It's the most critical position in the game, and because it is, that can influence results on any given night. They're going to play a team. They're playing the Nashville Predators on Thursday night. And when they play that team, when they lost that game in overtime about a little more than a week ago, they lost because they got outplayed in that position. And it wasn't that Ersson was poor by any stretch. They took 40 shots in a game, and UC Saros was outstanding in that one. So you can win a game that maybe looks like you don't have any business winning because your goalie's playing really well. And I think the Flyers have experienced that a little bit over the last 3 games, where maybe they shouldn't have been in position to beat Washington, or shouldn't have been in position to beat the Devils in overtime. But Harrison's making a difference, and because of that, you get to keep this thing rolling because he's able to just step in, especially at a moment's notice. Possibly that happened with the Washington game. It was looking like it was going to be Carter Hart's game, and then we find out right up against game time pretty much,
Mhm.
Sam Erson's going to get the start, and he comes in and wins another game in a shootout, which, mentally preparing for a game as a goalie is sometimes a key to a goaltender's performance. He just seems to be able to go with the flow and not have much affect him. He's a really calm, cool, and collected character, and that really helps when you're a goalie.
So bouncing off of the goaltending thing, and especially talking about UC Saros, they're coming off of a loss against Vancouver where he was pulled in the third period due to his performance. How do you think that matchup between the Flyers and the Predators is going to go tonight?
Well, I think that the loss that they just had in particular, the 5-2 loss to Vancouver. Similarly, the Devils had lost a game coming into Tuesday like that, and John Tortorella had said something along the lines of, we've got to be ready to play because they're coming off of a bad loss.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to want to come out firing, come out hard, come out ready to play. So we have to be ready to answer the call. I think the message stays the same because Nashville has been playing a lot better. I mean, I know they got off to a bit of a slow start in the beginning of the year, and they've played a lot better. They've played themselves back into playoff contention. And a loss like they just had doesn't help anything. It just, it's kind of a lost game for them. And they're going to, between both things, Saros getting pulled in the game is going to make him want to play better. And the team overall is going to want to play better. So
Mm-hmm.
both of those things factor in, and the Flyers just have to be ready. I think they don't need to change a lot from what they did against Nashville previously. They got 40 shots in the last game they played
Yeah.
against them. That usually equates to winning, especially I think the shot total was 40-22. So you outshoot a team by that much, you usually find a way to win the game. Saros was outstanding. Maybe there's some things that individually players can pick up on that maybe they can try differently to score a few more goals in this one. Maybe the home ice advantage helps this time because of matchups. All those things come into play. But realistically, don't change much. Play your game, stick to what has worked for you on this 9-game point streak. And there's a decent chance that if you stick to those things, you'll come out of this game and it'll be 10 games in a row with points.
Mm-hmm. So the Flyers are so hot right now, like you said, on that 9-game point streak. What do you think is going to keep them hot? They have the offense going for them. Their defense is really building up. And Carter Hart, I heard, should be back in the lineup within the week. So what do you think is really their key to staying hot?
Yeah, I mean, they first of all, I don't think you can worry about the goalie situation there. Erson's getting the start against Nashville. Hart may be able to back up. They're still kind of waiting to figure that part out. I assume if he's good to go and cleared, that would mean he would start the other end of the back-to-back that's coming up here, but you never know. It's been an off and on thing with Carter Hart, so we'll have to wait and see with that. But I think the key to the next couple of games is just that, just to focus on the next couple of games because you are getting that break. Right now, you can't go much further than where the point streak is and only go a couple more games and you get some time off. It's going to be a good thing and a bad thing for them because, it's certainly a good thing. There are players who are going through some stuff. This gives Carter Hart some time. Sean Couturier's had a few maintenance days. He's been able to play, but it's clearly something's been bothering him a little bit. He hasn't looked like his complete self in the last handful of games. So a few days off can always be a benefit. And yet you also don't want to stop the momentum of being on such a long point streak. If they keep this thing going for the next 2 nights, against Nashville and Detroit and get it to 10 or 11 games or whatever it may turn out to be, you don't want to see that just stop right in its tracks and then have to figure out when you come back and your next game is against Vancouver 6 days later. How do we pick that back up? Especially, usually that first game out of a break is kind of it's kind of a sloppy game. It's kind of a dull, boring game because you're trying to play things safe. That's not really their style. They don't, they scored 3 goals against New Jersey on Tuesday, and all 3 of them were off of steals in neutral zone, steals in the offensive zone, anticipating plays, playing aggressive. That's their style. And if they want to keep this up, they have to play that style. Should be a lot easier this week because you're still in, kind of still in this fight to get to the break and you're still in that game mindset. But once that hits and you get a few days off, and for them, the break starts even earlier than most teams. There's a lot of teams that are playing on Saturday before the league pauses for 3 days, and they won't be. So they get an extra kind of built-in day for that. That's really going to be a challenge once they get past that point with how you come back from the break and how you approach those games on the West Coast once you're back. But for now, stay in the moment, stay with these next two games against Nashville and Detroit, and see what you can find in these next two games to stay where you are in the standings too, because nothing has changed with the rest of the Metro at all. The Metro is still crowded. It's still one of these things where if you want to keep proving people wrong, think you might be a playoff team, there's not a lot of talk about that right now. You know, we don't hear players talking about it much. John Tortorella kind of deflected that today too. Doesn't want to talk about it. Isn't there yet. That being said, the team knows where they are in the standings. And because of that, you still want to go out and play with that kind of mindset that you know where you are in the standings, and that losing a couple of games, even with the 9-game point streak that they're on, losing a couple games can really hurt you in that department.
So after the game on Tuesday, the Flyers are 8th in the league and 2nd in their divisional standing. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on these Flyers throughout the next couple of weeks leading into the break. We will have updates on the Instagram and on 973ESPN.com that you can check up, and we'll be back next week.